What if your business isn't losing customers because your product isn't good enough, but because the experience of using it is quietly pushing people away? Customer can arrive with genuine interest, understand what you are offering, and still leave without buying. Sometimes the problem isn't the product, the price, or the marketing. It's what happens in the moments between. Today's guest is Amara Ahmed, a behavioral psychology driven CRO and US strategist and the founder of Precision Consulting. She has spent a decade inside some of the region's biggest growth platforms, including Delivering Hero, Food Panda, Talabat, and Daras, working across 15 countries and eventually leading teams of more than 200 people with three P profit and loss responsibility. 2002, in 2022, Amara started Precision Consulting. In 2025, she made the leap to build it full time. Today, after auditing more than 120 funnels, she combines behavioral psychology, data, US, and practical growth experiences to help businesses understand why people don't convert and what to do about it. But there's another layer to her story. Mara was often the only woman in the room. She became the first woman in her extended family to move away for work independently and the first to start a business. So today we're talking about conversion, psychology, ambition, entrepreneurship, and being the outsider in high pressure environment. What happens when you finally decide to build something on your own terms? Amara, welcome to the show.
Hey, Darlington, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amara. So you spent 10 years inside some of the biggest growth platforms in the region. What did working that close to the numbers teach you about why people actually buy or don't buy?
A lot of businesses, initially when we started working, I think we used to think that it had specifically to do with price. And don't get me wrong, pricing, of course, plays a huge role in, why people buy or not. But uh, what we need to understand is that there are different types of buyers, right? There are price sensitive buyers. There are buyers who are looking for a certain experience. There are buyers who are looking for a certain quality, right? So even if you look at it from that perspective, it goes back to the psychology of the buyer itself. So you need to really understand, why is your buyer present? And I think that's where the initial, friction, or the initial, I would say, leakage in certain funnels begins, when businesses really fail to understand that psychology um, of the traffic that's coming onto their platform. What is the buyer or the user that's coming on to their platform, or even the user that they're trying to attract? Who is this ideal user? Why is their particular product the answer, to their needs? And then how do they interact with this, particular platform, their website or their app? What's their state of mind? What's their need? Uh, and when they're in there, then what are the information points that they need to actually make this particular purchase? So I think a lot of it goes, in a consideration. And oftentimes, what we think is just top of the funnel, which is get the people in, and do we have the right price? But there's so much more in between that needs to be taken into consideration.
All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful answer. You have said businesses often leave revenue on the table, not because their product is broken, but because nobody has looked closely enough at how people move through it. What does that look like in practice?
what that looks like in practice is a lot of the times, businesses are so focused on scaling traffic and optimizing, the top of the funnel. And what I mean by that is just really increasing their ad spends, making sure that, more and more traffic is coming in. But what happens is that they just have a larger group of people coming in and having a bad experience. So if they don't really look closely at the data of what is happening once people come onto the platform, um, and what is the sort of experience they're having, where are people falling off, um, then what you do is you set this sort of precedent, and perception in the user's mind that that is just the sort of subpar experience that you provide, right? And so you've wasted all those precious ad dollars, and you've kind of created this image of yourself which is not the best. So I think what we really need to do is really look at, the conversion numbers and not the conversion number as a whole. I think that's another issue that oftentimes we do is we just look at the overall conversion rate, like number of people that came onto the platform and number of people that bought. But really, a funnel stage, the page to page conversion, how many people went from one page to another, and then further breaking it down from a mobile and a desktop, so platform level, because oftentimes when we look at it together, one platform's conversion, or percentage being very high can oftentimes cover up a particular platforms being very low, and so that really hides the real issue and stops you from actually fixing what needs to be fixed, right? And and in that, what we often do is we don't realize what's broken. And so we just keep funneling in traffic and building on this already broken experience. And so our customers think, that this is just the subpar experience, that a company provides. And and to be honest, then it's not even that we get to result them or we get to convert them into customers. These are just traffic or viewers that come in and never really convert into customers, and they go. And so the next time, or much later, when you actually do start working on these things and you have fixed it, and you retarget those people, you have to spend a lot more, or you have to work a lot harder to actually get that traffic, because they've already come on and they've already had a negative experience, right? So now to actually get them back, it's a much harder job. So I think it's very important, to be a lot more cognizant and a lot more, um, you know, conscious and careful about these details from the start itself, and be more careful about your middle section of the funnel, because I think a lot of companies don't really focus on that. It's very much top line, or how many orders are we getting. We're not really optimizing for the actual experience of the user, and we say things like customer is king, but that's what we if we really want to make a customer centric experience, then that's what you need to optimize for. You need to optimize for the middle of the funnel, because that's the experience that the customer actually gets. So how seamless is that? How intuitive is that? Um, are they getting all the information that they need? Is it frictionless? Is it do they have all the pictures? Do depending on what product you're giving, are the contact touch points present? So of course it depends on the industry and the product that you're selling, but that is the sort of focus that's required.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amara. So moving on. What are some psychological reasons someone can genuinely want a product but still fail to take the next step?
I think in today's day and age, honestly, we have such an influx of websites and platforms. There is no shortage of, you know, um, platforms availability of where one can actually go and buy a thing from, right? So oftentimes you have a high supply. Um, so when you're actually going out and looking for a product, you will find it. Or even if you're scrolling, it's very easy. It's become very it's also become a very consumerism driven sort of like society. We're very used to you know just needing random knickknacks, whatever. And so oftentimes people will find themselves wanting to buy random things. Now, what happens in terms of psychologically, some of the things that stop people from actually buying is the trust factor, right? So let's say I genuinely actually really want something, but then I have questions like, is this platform legitimate? If it's not a particular brand that I've heard of, if it's a completely new brand, and this is not something that has gone viral, it may be completely legitimate, but because it's new, and I come onto the website. And it does not seem to have, any reviews or any social proof, then I'm going to be cautious about whether or not the thing I'm going to be getting is going to be legitimate, right? At the same time, I'm going to be cautious about the fact that when I put in my credit card details, is it going to be trustable, right? So I'll be looking out for what does that payment portal look like? Is it something, that I usually see, like a Stripe or a Shop Pay portal or Google Pay, or does it look, fishy where I might get to be getting, scam messages later on, and I'm gonna have my credit card details leaked, and that's going to be a whole issue. Or it's going to be even a product quality thing where I might be looking at a product, and it might be something I want, but the pictures are not really super clear, and so I'm not really sure if what I'm going to get is going to actually look that way, because the pictures seem to be, a little too AI, and so I can't really tell if what what the product is going to look in, reality. And oftentimes, if you have, for example, image reviews, someone who's actually received the product and put up an image review saying, "Hey, this is what I actually got," those can kind of counteract those, suspicions or those sort of confusions. But when those things are not present, then I don't really know if this is something I want to proceed with. And then if I don't like it, if I'm, for example, if I'm on a fashion website, right? So what if it doesn't fit, especially when it's new brands? You're not really sure about the sizing, or if it's a particular price point, you want to know, am I going to be able to return it if it doesn't fit, if I don't like it? So what is the return policy? How easy is it going to be for me to send it back? Again, if these sort of informations and policies are not upfront and center and clear, then again, I'm going to be hesitant in terms of making that sort of purchase. Um, and also the sort of experience, like if I feel like the platform is incredibly buggy, or the product seems fine and the picture seems fine, but there's just it seems low quality, it seems incredibly slow, and things are just too difficult to type, right? I remember there was a beverage brand that was super super hyped up, and I thought, okay, I'll check it out, and I went to buy it, and I got to the cart, and and when I was buying it from my phone, but on the cart page, while I was entering the details, the keyboard was so hard to navigate because I think they hadn't optimized it for mobile, so the tap size was really bad. And I tried with one field, I got through, but the second field it was the same thing again, and they were forcing an account creation, and there were too many fields, and all of the fields were optimized for desktop. And in the end, I was like, you know what, it's not worth it. So it wasn't even that, I was worried about losing my credit card details or anything. It was a legitimate, product. It was incredibly well hyped. It was very viral, so I knew it was real, but it was just such a poor experience. The fact that I made it all the way to the checkout, and then they were forcing me to make an account, and not just make an account, but also really just forcing me to, really push in and fill multiple fields with which are not even optimized for a mobile. Then it becomes a really frustrating experience, and then I was like, you know what, not worth it. I'll just try it later, get it from elsewhere. It does not matter. So I think when these are the sort of things that make a customer go like, yeah, I want it, but I don't want it that bad.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amara. So you have worked across 15 countries. What has that experience taught you about how differently people make decisions online across cultures?
There are certain patterns that I think are common, and I think there's certain patterns, that of course vary. And it has a lot to do with, of course, understanding each culture. I think some of the things that you need to take into account for each country is, their which particular payment method, for example, that they prefer. There are certain countries which just prefer, for example, cash on delivery. And in those countries, if you force a, card payment, you know, payment option on the checkout, then you're going to be losing customers, right? And we've tried that in some of the South Asian markets, and it's we've had a fairly poor result. And then, of course, similarly, if you try to do the same thing in GCC countries where a lot of people aren't carrying cash, and you try to push them on cash, then you're going to see order losses here as well, right? Because it's a very card driven economy. So I think it has a lot to do with people's preferences in terms of payment methods. It has a lot to do with people's preferences in terms of, the sort of visual experiences they like. But at the same time, there are certain things that are fairly, common as well, which is in terms of the attention span, for example. That's going to be the same for a user. You will only have 3 seconds when they come onto your platform for between which they decide whether or not they actually like, and they're going to scroll lower or they're going to bounce off, right? um, what that platform is going to look like, of course, is going to vary between Malaysia and in between Sri Lanka and between Pakistan, because each of these countries is used to a slightly different visual experience, or these people like slightly different visual experiences. Um, but those are more cosmetic nuances. The the behavioral psychology is very much the same. The way that the user's eye moves in a certain f pattern is the same. What you need to realize, I think, as a company, is that yes, you have certain best practices, and you really need to understand the psychology and the behavioral laws. But what you also need to do is you really need to understand the user and the culture and their needs and their nuances, and find, the middle ground and the combination of the two to really create the best experience. I think oftentimes, the thing that we fail to do, um, when entering, um, new markets, is that we think that one thing that has, worked in a similar enough market is just good enough to be applied elsewhere. Um, i- or one thing that's worked in a region is, is good enough to kind of like apply everywhere else. And I think that's where we're wrong, because you know all people are different people, and we are not putting enough effort into understanding and customizing for those nuances. And that's the same reason I think a lot of, for example, the AI solutions today, um, do great work when we talk about, automating manual and repetitive tasks. But when you work on, really working on, for example, creative and optimizing true, you know, expert tasks, it still falls short, because it still requires very much someone who needs to understand the details, who needs to understand the person, who needs to understand the person sitting on the other side, and what exactly it is that's important to them, what their social, profile is like, what their wants are like, what their personality is like. Um, and when we don't, customize for that, when we don't humble ourselves, to that, then we don't really create a customer centric experience. um, then we're just kind of creating a, you know copy paste, minimally, you know custom not even minimally customized, just minimally changed experience. um and so we can say like it's personalized, but the only thing personalized is our algo for the sorting order for the products and the categories.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amara, for that wonderful answer. You describe yourself as neurodivergent and diagnosed. Looking back at your career, are there things about the way you worked or thoughts that makes more sense to you now?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. um I think a lot of it makes a lot more sense now, both during both from my career, I think, from, you know my school life, all of it. I think, once you have the, vocab for it, and you can kind of really go into sort of the research, and deep dive into it, it gives you a different sort of lens to look at it from. To be honest, I was always, into psychology, and I think this is something that, is true for a lot of people who do end up, either, being late diagnosed, or simply going into, late diagnosed and, going into psychology careers. Uh, they pick up psychology as an interest, in their, childhood or teenage years, and it turns out it's as an attempt to kind of, basically self-soothe, and, sort of, um, self heal themselves. But it's more so just to kind of understand. And I think while, I read that, I found it fascinating, and I would read a lot about, the brain, and all of the different, different, um, you know, neurodivergent, strains that existed, the different, disorders existed, all of the DSM-5, everything. And sometimes I felt, I could relate, but obviously, you don't really give yourself that sort of permission because it's not really official. And so you're very much in uh, you're very much in that sort of place where you go by what the people around you are saying, and so it's you're quirky, you're weird, and you're operating in a way that you can't really explain to other people, and they can't really understand either, and so you feel like there's like some sort of like a broken wiring, right? And I used to like say this, that I feel like I'm missing some sort of a manual that everybody got handed around, and I don't have it, and every time I interact with people, I feel like I'm trying to like take down notes to kind of build my own, to sort of figure out how exactly, one makes it through. Um, and I think afterwards, it made a significant difference to me on a personal level, because it just gave me, I think, a lot more in terms of tools. It gave me, uh, more ability to be able to be more empathetic to myself. I wouldn't say, to be honest, that it made a difference to my career in the public sense because I was never, vocal about it. I never felt comfortable being vocal about it, because I think it's only very recently that people have started talking about this. And even now, I think that privilege is very much limited to, certain places, certain sets of people. And I think, especially at the seniority I was, I would definitely felt like, my career and the speed at which I would then be able to progress would definitely get impacted if, this was something that was made aware, to the people around me. Because as much as people, workplaces like to say, diversity, inclusion, and all of that, it's not something that actually gets, taken. Um, it's not something that actually is integrated. And you can see that in the way that, we don't actually have inclusive workplaces. Our workplaces are not built for neurodivergent places. Our work policies are not built for that. So, I was very sure that, this would only hamper my growth. So I very much, continued, the masking, but I think on a personal level, it allowed me to be a lot more empathetic with myself, a lot more. It allowed me to go out and seek, better help, better tools, a better circle, in my personal life of support, which made the entire experience, a lot better. Um, and for me, I think that's also what fueled the entire thing with precision. Is I wanted then, it changed my perspective in terms of what I wanted for my career. I no longer wanted that, the initial career ladder that I was going for. I wanted to move away, and I wanted to, set up my own company where the the culture actually spoke to the values that we were claiming to have. And, when we said that we had an action bias, or we had ownership, or we had integrity, then, or we talked about, diversity and inclusion, then we truly talked about diversity and inclusion. And when we talked about empathy, we talked about, true empathy, which meant for everyone, right? And that's the sort of culture, and workplace that I want to build. Not just a pretty sign, that I can, hang, on the wall or write on people's planners and stuff, but a living, breathing culture where people are not afraid, to to own to the fact that they are neurodivergent or whatever, but they're comfortable and they have the right tools and considerations in their workplace to be able to do their best work.
All right. So, Amara, if someone listening right now, a business owner listening right now, believes their funnel is working because they are getting traffic and making some sales, what signs should tell them that they are quietly losing revenue? What is the first thing they should investigate?
They should definitely look at their heat maps in their Google Analytics. I think heat maps are a good way to kind of see, how low people are scrolling. And more importantly, I think Google Analytics gives you a very good view in terms of, you know, page to page conversions or what are known as micro conversions. So yes, you may be, getting traffic and yes, you may be getting orders, but what percentage of those people are you losing along the way, right? So what percentage of people did you lose before they ever even added to cart? What percentage of people did you lose between the add to cart and the checkout? I think those, uh, two big numbers are usually the biggest indicators that can help you understand, where you stand, but don't look at them on their own and think, that you're doing well or that you're doing poorly. This is another mistake that I think a lot of businesses do is they just compare to a general, benchmark to just SaaS or just e-com. Be specific and compare within your industry, because what's a good conversion rate for a fashion brand is not a good conversion rate for for an appliances company, because they have very different customers, very different consideration life cycles. So a fashion, e-commerce site is supposed to have a higher conversion rate than a appliances conversion appliances brand. So when you are looking at these numbers, please make sure that you're also benchmarking it to the right thing, um, and defining good and bad accordingly. And once you have that, then I think that gives you a good place to get started on where are the right places for improvement for you.
Okay, so Amara, for those who would like to connect with you and learn more about what you do, how can they do that?
You can access us. You can just come get us at our website at goprecision.co. We have our, you can book our calls there. You can request a free mini audit there. And we also have a really big insights hub available there where there's a bunch of resources. So for anybody who's looking to just DIY and upskill themselves or fix their websites themselves, please feel free to use the Insights Hub as well.
All right, thank you so much, Amara. It's been a pleasure to have you here on the show. And to my audience, if this episode is speaking to you, make sure you share it with someone out there who needs to hear this. I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys on the next episode. Bye, guys. Thank you, Amara.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.